Hello, folks. Welcome back to another exciting episode of The Wheels Are Falling Off. Oh, they sure are, but we're still in denial here in Australia, of course, because I'll get to that later. But I don't know if you know, but Denmark, hang on, as of February the 1st, which is, a couple of days ago, have ended all their COVID laws. Which is pretty exciting, isn't it? You'd think you'd hear something like that here in Australia, but no. We'll get to that soon. But I'll just have a look at this. You'll see how Denmark's modelling, which they actually have a commission with a whole bunch of different universities and different people involved, as opposed to one institute like the Doherty Institute giving you all your modelling and all that sort of stuff. What you'll see here is how these graphs work, and how when say you scaled up from Denmark's population and scaled it up onto the UK's population, you'll see I'll let them explain it, but yeah, we'll have a listen.
BB. And then, of course, you need to narrow in. As soon as you have the information, you would need to reproduce your models and see. Now that we are more certain, we can see that it's actually going this direction. So in the beginning, when we did our models, we also had a lot of uncertainty on the estimates, and we have been trying to narrow it down as fast as we could with the information we thought we had.
So you haven't been looking at other countries' models and analysing why they were so different? You don't have a theory as to what variable it was they chose wrong?
No, not exactly. I can't pinpoint that, and it needs really a lot of work to get into other models. It's not just a fast, quick look. You can do that. You really need to spend some time and understand the parameters you have chosen to put in your models to say why they're so different. What you also see sometimes is that you use a panel of models to inform your decision makers, because it can be quite different from the choice of model that you have and the details in the model you have.
One more question on this, because I've done some back of the envelope calculations here. Actually, if your numbers, Denmark is a population of 5.8 million, you were forecasting 25,000 to 55,000 roughly cases as a peak, and 150 to 360 hospitalizations per day as a peak. And as we've just seen, roughly that is what happened. England is almost exactly 10 times the size of Denmark, 56 million as opposed to 5.8 million. And had our modelers been like you and forecast 250 to 550 cases a day and 1,500 to 3,000 hospitalizations a day, they would also have been roughly correct. We had slightly under that. Our peak, it looks like, was 205,000 cases and hospitalizations 2,300. So your model times 10 was a pretty good forecast of what happened in England. What we got from SAGE, the government committee, was actually 600,000 to 2 million cases a day as the maximum, and 3,000 to 10,000 hospitalizations a day, which is 5 times plus what actually happened. I know that you can't be responsible for anyone else's modeling, but I just want to ask one more time, can you understand how groups in other universities came up with such wildly different numbers? And it leads people to feel conspiratorial, feel distrusting of the whole process of mathematical modeling, that different groups of experts can come up with such divergent things. What should we think about that difference to try and understand it?
I know that uncertainty and these insecurity intervals that you have in these models, they're really a difficult thing to communicate. We also had some issues to even communicate the span in our models, because that's also equally a wide span, and it is actually quite difficult to communicate, because when you do handle an epidemic, you want to be quite certain, and you can't always have these certainties in models. So basically it comes back to what can you use a model for.
So as you can see, models are pretty much whatever they feel like making up to do whatever they want with, like lies, damn lies, and statistics and modelling, I'd say, as well. But yeah, I'll put a link in there to watch this whole video. It's very interesting. We'll go on to the next thing. So we'll jump over. We're going to go over to Canada now. Wow, this is a bit of island hopping. Canada leading the pack in vaccine purchases. Now you know why they're pushing back so hard. Look who's second on the list. no one other than good old Australia. No wonder these politicians are so desperate to get this jungle juice into your arms. Like UK, they already had a heap because they used those modelling numbers to make it look like there was going to be the end of the world. So fear took over again, and they're still doing it here. But yeah, have a look at these numbers. Then when you go down, you scroll down, you go down to all these other places, and you got to work out, populations and all that sort of stuff. But we're so high in there. Then you go down here and you see these other countries, India, stuff. All these guys have hardly bought any jab juice. So it's pretty funny. We'll go to the next one. Now we're back in Australia, in Victoria, with the Pandemic Declaration Accountability and Oversight Committee review of pandemic orders. This is a bit of fun. They're talking to Dr. Cho Sutton. And what's he doesn't even have a gig really, but anyway, let's see what's going on here with Georgie Crozier from the Liberal Party. Let's have a look.
Talks about the acting chief health officer, but I want to understand, was it your advice to stop IVF?
Oh, I should make that point. See how they're starting to use this is done by the acting chief health officer and all this sort of stuff. That's the crazy thing. Cho Sutton only signed off on, I think, 2 documents in this whole saga. The first one, when it was about the emergency work, the healthcare workers and stuff, he signed off on that, and then a whole bunch of other people have signed off on the other ones. Like there's that woman, I can't remember her name, which is quite convenient, isn't it? And then there's that guy from the Doherty Institute, that other one, he signed off on a heap, on all the other mandate ones. So he's like, when, say this all comes out, the truth, he's going to put his hand up and say, oh, look, I didn't sign off on anything, blah, blah, blah. But this is how it gets crazy. You got people like Mr. Andrews, the Premier, who's pretty much taken everything into his own hands without any health advice, because you can't say you're getting health advice from Martin Foley, because he's a dope. He wouldn't know how to look after himself. He's one of the most unhealthy looking chaps you'll find around, who's acting as a health person, which is quite odd. But anyway, let's listen to what she's got to say. You know, it could be all theatre, but everything could be theatre at the end of the day.
No, it wasn't.
So whose decision was that, Professor Sutton?
So it's really on the advice of the acute health team. The state controller is the Secretary of the Department of Health, Professor Ewan Wallace. He has to consider the advice that he's getting from the commissioning and service improvement team within the health department.
Okay.
He clearly.
So you didn't have any input into that, or the acting chief health officer?
No, I have to have input because I have to make the consideration about whether it would have really substantial public health implications. With respect to elective surgery, it is largely a matter, and this is what I confirmed with the State Controller, it is largely a matter of the available workforce, the available theatre beds, the available ward beds, and so it was really about hospital system capacity, and it didn't have a really material impact on public health implications.
I'll come back to the elective surgery, but on the 19th of January there was verbal advice made to the minister which hasn't yet been published. That was the same day as the government backflipped on the IVF ban. Was that your advice? Or was it then Professor Wallace's?
So the decision to resume IVF was again based on that advice given to Professor Wallace. I was involved, again being asked by the then Acting Minister for Health, James Merlino, as to whether there would be public health implications in the resumption of IVF. And again, I said it's not a material issue from a public
so
health.
that was an error of judgment clearly then made because of the decision that was done in the first place, and it was after that massive campaign. If I can move on to the resumption of elective surgery, you're talking about the lack of theatre beds. As of today, we've got 33 people on a ventilator, 873 in hospital, and 10,000 cases. Why can Victoria's health system not cope with this? Why is elective surgery not resuming? And what is your advice to the Minister about a gradual plan to resume elective surgery? Based on these figures, and you spoke about modelling. Could the committee have all of that modelling so that we can understand thoroughly what advice you're providing to the Minister and the government on these matters?
So as I've said, I don't provide advice on the cessation or the resumption of elective surgery. They are matters for the State Controller. Where it intersects with
but you're providing advice, sorry to interrupt you, you're providing advice on the epidemiological modelling, the modelling that has been done. You've referred to that time and time again. You said that this modelling's been done. We had a briefing from Professor Wallace. He wouldn't give us the modelling last week about some of the impacts to hospitalisations. So surely you have a view on why elective surgery, which is having a massive impact within the Victorian community, and those people who can't get their surgery, why that's not taken into consideration, Professor Sutton? Why is it being handballed to the controller that you've just referred to?
Well, the role of the Chief Health Officer in the Public Health and Wellbeing Act is pretty clear. It relates to matters of public health. It does not relate to matters of the operational management of the hospital system or the health system more broadly. And so it's entirely appropriate that Professor Wallace is the decision maker in that, but also that he interacts with me about the potential public health implications.
Well, they're big public health implications because we've got a backlog of people in pain and becoming more debilitated.
Well, that's not a public health issue per se. Public health refers to the transmission risk with COVID-19 and the best measures to manage that.
Okay, as I said, we've got some good figures coming out, and as you recognise the Victorian community's efforts on that. If I could go to then the advice that was provided on Friday regarding the tennis crowd, which would increase to an 80% ability to attend the tennis, which coincided with the tennis finals, magnificent as they were. And at that time, there were 101,000 active cases, 39 deaths, 114 in ICU, and nearly 13,000 new cases on Friday when that decision was made. So what other restrictions will be relaxed if that tennis crowd could go from 65% capacity to 80%, based on what you're saying in terms of the risk to the Victorian public? I mean, on Friday, those numbers were higher than the numbers of the previous Monday.
So the decision about the increased cap for the tennis was a decision made by the Minister for Health. I didn't make a recommendation.
So he didn't get advice? Sorry, Dr. Sutton, did he not get advice from you about the risk of spread when the crowd increased?
So I had a request for a public health view, and I provided no recommendation for or against. I said that it was primarily a matter really of social licence and social considerations as a really significant public
social
event.
Considerations override, because it's a very significant public event, which we all agree with was fabulous. But the social considerations override the public health risk. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the pandemic bill, as I understand it, explicitly gave, passed through Parliament, explicitly gave the Minister the opportunity and indeed the obligation to have broader considerations about what pandemic orders should be in place.
Well, I hope he can... Without health advice. So if I could just move on to another question. I thank you. That's very helpful, Professor Sutton. You provided, or the Chief Health Officer's office provided advice to the Minister on the 7th of January that one size fits all for mandates for boosters should not apply. Why did the advice change?
I don't believe the advice has changed. What do you mean with respect to one size fits all?
Well, that's in terms of the orders. It's there that one size fits all for mandates for boosters should not apply. And yet the Premier yesterday was pushing, last Thursday was pushing at National Cabinet that he wants a third vaccination to be mandatory. He didn't rule out a fourth and a fifth vaccination to be mandatory also. And yesterday that he wants that third dose to be mandated within weeks. So was that your advice to government?
I haven't been requested to provide advice on broader vaccine mandates at this stage.
So that's a Premier's own decision?
When and if I get a request from the Minister for advice on those potential measures, I'll be very happy to assess the epidemiological situation at that time and to provide my recommendations on how that might change, if at all.
Thank you. So it sounds like the Premier is making these decisions without your input as yet.
I don't believe there have been any decisions made. When I get a request for
He said yesterday he wants third doses mandated within weeks. He went to National Cabinet pushing for this. And in this advice on the 10th of January, I have considered a consistent one-size-fits-all approach to vaccination mandates for all workforces and even for the general community. But at this time, I do not consider this to be a proportionate response for reasons. Now, that's the Acting Chief Health Officer advice to the Minister for Health. So I'm really perplexed that that you're not giving the advice. You're saying that you're not giving that advice, yet it's in the written advice, and the Premier is coming out and saying this. So what on earth is going on regarding the mandate of boosters, and who is giving the advice to the Health Minister and the Premier when he's going out there publicly stating this? Where's the advice coming from? Is it not from you, which he has told us, you have told us for 2 years, that it's proportionate, it's reasonable, it's keeping Victorians safe, and yet it sounds like the Premier is making these decisions up. Is that? Well, Professor Sutton just said, Miss Ward.
When additional pandemic orders are made that alter the mandates around vaccines to be broader or less broad, and I get a request from the Minister for Health for recommendations around that, I will look at the evidence at the time, I will look at the epidemiology at the time, and I'll provide my recommendations.
So that advice hasn't been requested as yet?
No, it has not.
Thank you. So with the changed rules, why is mandatory QR coding still necessary?
Really, QR codes are really part of our way of life across many parts of Australia.
But they're not working.
They do play a role. They are not a huge impulse. Most of us do it automatically.
But can we contact trace? Sorry to interrupt you. I'm just curious because no one seems to be QR.
I can't believe how many photos you're going to collect of those ugly-looking bloody square boxes on the side of a building these days. Imagine you have a whole photo gallery of these ugly squares. Great. But yeah, as you can see, I had to let it go a bit there because she does have a fair crack at him. And as you can see, it's not about health. It's about social rubbish by the looks of things. But yeah, there's no sense in this. This is just highlights how desperate they are. It's just to get the jungle juice in people and get them stuck on this program. It's a friggin' joke, to be honest. But anyway, I'm going to move on to something else. I can put a link to that in the description as well as the other video. Clearly not about health. Baby health checks have been suspended in Victoria for 6 weeks. Experts working... this is how silly it's getting. This Code Brown, the only thing Code Brown is in Mr. Andrews' pants, to be honest, because he's full of shit. And it's just silly. You know, there you go, there's another one there. No vax for HIV after 40 years of research. No vax for cancer after more than 100 years of research. No vax for the common cold ever, and yet this virus gets four pharma companies all making one, and now you can make a cocktail and put whatever in your body, whatever your suits. And I loved it when people were going, oh, which one are you going to get? Oh, I'd get this one, and I'm going to wait for the Novavax or this sort of stuff. Really? Wow. And just wondering how much people know about this convoy to Canberra, because the mainstream media aren't looking at it really at all. And the only time I've seen them use footage of it is when they want to use it as part of their get rid of the Prime Minister program, where they showed footage of people protesting. But the thing is, those people were there from every state in Australia. They weren't there about him necessarily, about asking him to get a spine to fight against these states that have gone psychotic. You know, like everybody they came from every state, and you've heard no news about it. I asked people today, I said, have you heard about this? No, didn't know anything was going on. Ask them even about the Canada one, and, you know, that's huge. There's so many trucks there. Even their Prime Minister's playing it down like a, what's his name, Trudeau? Yeah, it's just getting silly, you know. Look at these cops on Canberra, like crack cheers on each other with their pepper spray. Really, they're antagonising the people. They want them to get violent. They're trying to rile them up. They're trying everything to make them look like they're bad people. That's when you see the media put the footage out. It's a joke. It is a joke. Like, seriously, they are playing people all the time. And I'm going to leave you with one more video and then, enjoy your night. Or what we can of it. Hang on.
COVID lies and scaremongering, it's all falling apart fast. Now, first on the vaccine mandates. It's now a proven fact that being vaccinated and boosted neither protects you from contracting the virus nor spreading it. And more shocking is the new data that the vaccinated are more likely to contract Omicron than the unvaccinated. Now, a fantastic piece today in the Wall Street Journal correctly notes one preprint study found that after 30 days, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines no longer had any statistically significant positive effect against Omicron infection. And after 90 days, their effect went negative, i.e. vaccinated people were more susceptible to Omicron infection. So, this makes comments from teachers' unions reps attempting to justify the ongoing school closures all the more infuriating. So it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It was 100 days of masking. It was back to normal by 4th of July. It was, if you're vaccinated, you won't get COVID, and you'll get your life back, it'll all be normal again. All lies. But as with lies, they're eventually overtaken by truth and experience. And the double-barreled impact of both are now hitting the COVID control squads who've exploited a tragedy for their own political and economic gain.
Yeah, I hope when this shitstorm settles we can let some heads roll because they deserve to be rolled. You have a good day, everyone.